Hey Corey, this is Amanda. I just wanted to let you know we are streaming live on YouTube now.
Is my audio working?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Hi, folks.
Hello, Ben. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for your longer than I expected response to me a couple days ago. Appreciate that, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's information that I'm not sure. Well, we'll keep it to email. I guess let's say that. I don't know that
Yeah,
that it's available for the public.
right. Got it.
All right. I received emails from Brett and Ryan that will not be attending today. So with the 5 board members that are here, we have a quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 3:00 p.m.
Excuse me, Corey. Is there someone I'm not seeing? I only see 4 board members.
Jean, myself, Jesse, Jessica. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. James. I was counting you in the quorum for some reason.
No one's heard from James that he's not attending, right?
Yeah, he hasn't indicated that he's not, yeah.
I think he's planning to.
Ben, can I ask you, Corey, tell me if it's inappropriate or not. Just a question on a little neighborhood issue, and I think it might affect kind of how we look at traffic calming in the future.
Yeah, can we save it? Isn't there a board questions?
Yeah, there is.
All
Yeah.
right, then maybe let's ask it at that time.
Okay, well, I just thought it was something you wouldn't need a quorum for because there's no decisions or whatever, so.
Yeah,
say-
we don't need a quorum for any of, we're allowed to have discussion.
Right, that's why I thought I'd do it now until we get a quorum and then maybe also address it later when we have one, but rather than just sitting around.
We'll give him a couple more minutes.
No problem.
Jesse, I like the summertime dew you got going on. I think I need to do that also.
Thank you. I let my husband cut my hair on the front porch. On the front porch. That's the truth. So this is low maintenance.
Are you from the South originally?
I am, yes. I was born in Tennessee and lived there for most of my life until we had our son. And then we were ready for an adventure. And then we've been in Missoula. This is our 12th year. So we're considered permanent residents, and definitely it feels like home. We both put down roots here and, raised our son here, and it's been a great place.
Did you choose Missoula out of a hat, or was there a job opportunity, or what was the?
We wanted an adventure, and we were looking for an outdoor lifestyle. And so we interviewed in New England and Oregon and here, and it was the best job in the best town.
Oh, great.
And I don't think we even really knew how good it was because they only give you about 48 hours to interview. And so you kind of have to make a snap judgment. And I feel like I used to tell people we didn't know it, but we'd secretly entered some lottery and we won when we got the job and were able to move here. So.
Ben, how's your cargo bike adventures going? I've only seen you on it a couple times, and I'm trying to remember if it's an e-bike or not, and how it's
It
working
is
out.
an e-bike. It's great. It's really yeah, we love it. My wife does Costco runs with it, and yeah, Nathan loves riding in it. He really digs hanging in the car seat in the front of it. Although he's realizing that he gets some negative attention if he starts like threatening to drop stuff off the out of the side of the box.
So did you, you must have done quite a bit of research, and I'm assuming you got it through the mail or?
You know,
shipping.
we actually we went to a shop in Seattle that specializes in family bicycling, and so they have a lot of different cargo bikes and trailers and ways to bike together as a family. And I test rode several different ones. I was pretty committed to a box bike instead of a long tail because I like the idea of him being able to ride earlier in the bike, and being able to look at him, and
Right.
when he starts dropping stuff, hopefully most of it stays in the bike instead of just littering behind me on the trail somewhere.
Had to put up a cargo netting around him. Or
Yeah, really. So so I test rode like 4 or 5 different ones at that shop in Seattle, figured out that this was the one that I wanted, and then came back to town and got in touch with one of the bike shops and said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Can you do it for me? And they ordered it and built it for me.
Cool.
Okay. That's a good question, Jesse. Should we try to text James? Has anybody got his number to ask him if he's going to be here?
I used to. I'd have to leave this screen to try to find it.
Yeah, I don't think I have it anymore.
Sorry, I do have it. I can text him.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Jessica.
Speaking of the family biking and all, I just added the person who did the Motherlode movie to my friend list. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
she's got a Facebook page, I think, and all, you know, the whole thing.
That's the woman in
I-
Portland that takes like 5 or 6 kids around in her bike.
There was one woman in the movie that had 5 kids. She had one in the front, and there was one tag along bike, you know, that hooks on and the kids can pedal, and yeah, it was, I don't know if everybody else on the board has seen it. It's a pretty amazing movie. They had it at the Roxy last year, and quite a story, because she had used to be a bike racer. She's like, I forget what country she's from, but then she started deciding she wanted, after the kids, she got tired of driving them around and wanted to do more biking, and how do I do it? And, you know, and she did the whole kind of thing, Ben, I think that you did, and said, oh, checked up on. And then she started a whole, you know, like social media is, started a whole movement, whole group of people that talk to each other and share their innovations and adventures and frustrations and challenges and all that. Pretty amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, until James shows up, we don't have a quorum, but I'm going to go ahead and amend our start time to 3:08 p.m. So we can get things going. There's not really anything that I'm aware of that requires a decision from us today, except for possibly the CIP list. So agenda. So I'm just going to go ahead and list off everybody I see that's here. Jean Smith, Jessica Doherty Goodburn, Jesse Tuberty, myself, and Ben Weiss. All right. Does anybody have any additions or corrections or anything they need to make to the minutes? All right. I don't hear anything, so we'll just accept them as presented. I don't see any public comments. Does staff anything that they've come across? I'm not sure how that works.
No public comments directly. I have not received any directly related to bike ped board meeting or agenda items or anything like that.
Okay. All right. And then next we have General board member comments, this would be where you could ask your question, Gene.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Yeah, there's two situations that affected myself and my wife personally. The first one is, and again, Ben, you'd probably have a way to connect this because I'm sure part of it's Parks and Rec and part of it's Public Works. On the Milwaukee Road Trail, as you get to the west, toward the west end, it crosses a street just before the Reserve Street underpass. I think it's called Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very sharp 90-degree followed 15 feet later by a reverse 90-degree shift in the path because it goes along irrigation ditch. And between that and another property, it's right. James is here. Good. So what happens is, and I've got some pictures, and I was wondering if I could, I have them on my phone, not my iPad. But Ben, if you have a place, your personal phone, whatever, I can send you the pictures. Maybe some of the members have been out that way. But what happens is, the way it's set up, it almost invites people to cut across to the wrong side of the path because it's very tempting to simply take a diagonal stretch across that very short 90-degree, reverse 90-degree turn, if you can picture that. Are you familiar with that spot, Ben?
I am, and then the crosswalk itself is kind of at an angle because where the trail picks up to the west of Davis is a little north of where it leaves on the east of Davis.
It's at a slight angle. For my wife, she's almost had 2 head-on collisions with other cyclists, and she doesn't ride fast. So what happens is the people who are eastbound crossing that thing, as they come across the piano key that they just put down, and they come up on the curb on the east side of Davis, there's a sign there that's just on the sidewalk-ish part. And what that does is it really impedes the cyclists from riding to the right. And it really channels them over to the wrong side. And I think one of the cheapest and easiest fixes would be to move that sign farther south, that would move it about 10 feet, maybe 12 feet farther from the actual crossing. I expect when Public Works went in, they had their little Bible of where the sign should be located based on the crosswalk. But what that sign placement does is it really tends to push cyclists over to the wrong side. Plus, it's very tempting just to make a diagonal shoot across there. There's also some vegetation issues that make the sightlines problematic as things sprout up. And I don't know if that's the issue of contacting a property owner or if it's still on the, those vegetations is still on the right of way for the trail or not. So anyhow, Ben, I don't know if it's something, I'd be happy to go out there and look at it with you and somebody from Public Works at some point, try to work out something that's going to help things be better. You don't want to, you know, we worry enough about car crashes, but bike crashes are no fun either.
Yeah, I'll let you know if we need to take you up on that offer. I can tell you that we are reviewing the transportation. We've rebranded the Traffic Services Committee to being the Transportation Safety Team. And so we are currently reviewing that exact intersection already due to some complaints about speeding and failure to yield to trail users along Davis. And so we put out some counters recently and are trying to address all facets of safety there. And so your comments are gonna help provide some additional nuance to that conversation. And I'm looking forward to bringing this to the team and seeing what we can do. If people have trouble understanding what you're talking about, or if I don't get traction, then I will get back in touch with you and say, hey, let's go meet out there with one of the other Public Works folks and see what we can do.
Yeah, okay. Again, if I can use your personal phone or whatever, I can send you the pictures. One other thing, and I don't want to take up too much time real quick. There's a setup for doing traffic circles. on Maurice, which is a block west of where I live on Mansfield. So it looks like they're set up to do that. And I saw they were set up doing traffic counts. I'm assuming they're going to do a traffic count before and after. One of my concerns is, as just a regular citizen, is when those traffic circles for traffic calming are put in, is that going to shift eventually as people get used to it? Is that going to shift some of the load onto my street, Mansfield, and increase traffic there? And if so, what are the options, or what is the city doing to anticipate that type of issue and what they might do as a result?
Yeah, so we, good question, and one that we kicked around a little bit when talking about what to do with Maurice. And there are, we basically, no one expects there to be any shift to Mansfield. The dominant movement on Maurice is northbound from South Avenue to the university. And so the vehicle traffic, because we did do recent counts. We also have done counts when college was in session. We have, I think, 3 sets of counts on Maurice over the last 3 or 4 years. And what they show, especially when university is in session, is that the number of vehicles going northbound outnumbers the southbound by at least a 2 to 1. And so part of the reason for adding the new circles on Maurice is to slow that traffic and hopefully deter it from even using Maurice. And the goal is to put traffic back on Arthur where it belongs. We don't expect there to be a lot of, we would consider it successful if we moved 5 to 10% of that traffic. And we don't anticipate there being, a negligible impact on Mansfield or Madeline.
Yeah, it's only a 4-block stretch. I was just wondering. Okay, thanks.
That being said, if you observe, if there's, if people are doing crazy stuff, please let us know. One of the benefits of these kind of lightweight, low cost traffic circle implementations is that we can adjust and adjust the deployment as needed based on new information.
Are they thinking about doing a pop-up style, like painting planters and stuff like that?
Yep,
first?
exactly. They're going to be the same as that are on Franklin Street right now.
Okay. Yeah, the James Walter Memorial traffic circles. Yeah.
Not Memorial. Not anytime soon.
No,
anyway.
not Memorial. Thanks, man.
And so that is something, those will go in. They were hoping to get to them this week, but it might be a little delayed. Crews are still iffy. Their people are out kind of regularly. And so it's either this week or next they'll get those installed. And just a word about the counts. We do plan on doing counts afterwards, vehicle counts, but we put up bike ped counts, temporary counters for about 10 days. And what we saw is, even with university not in session, it was the past 10 days, what we see are about an average of 125 pedestrians a day and about 180 bikes per day on Maurice. And so that really is a significant number for a non-signed, non-marked neighborhood greenway. And so we're looking forward to continuing to measure those after the fact as well.
Okay. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Ben. I want to just note for the record that James has joined us, and we do now have a quorum. All right, Jessica, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the follow-up California Street trail crossing. I biked that over the weekend. I left my house in the University District, took the trail, went through that intersection, went to Karis, bought some plants, put them on my bike, brought them home. And what I would say about the new piano key updated and the signage is that it feels like the entire stretch of trail now is cohesive. It feels safe. The curb has been painted. There's signage in the road. There's signage on the trail saying yield. I feel like it just seems like a seamless continuation of the trail. So it was very much appreciated. The other thing was just a comment on Maurice, which I would say, because I live by Bonner Park, I mean, 9 times out of 10 walk or bike straight from my house to Maurice and then take Maurice to the university to cut through to the river trail. And I think there's a silent army of bike and pedestrians that are using that all the time. So it's nice to hear that it was counted and I'm right, but I see them all the
Yeah.
time. So I'm glad that you're going to calm traffic and make it safe because it's high density. The X's are there and people are accessing that road from all directions. So well done.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear your report about the California Street Milwaukee Trail crossing. The kind of secret to what makes that feel better, I think, is I mean, it's nice to have the signage updated and the pavement markings updated. Those things are great. But when we went out there and looked at it, what we noticed was that the berm for the irrigation ditch, the vegetation along it was super high and really blocked visibility of trail users when you're on the street and of people on the street when you're on the trail. And so we asked Parks to go in and trim that down, and they sent out a crew member with a weed whacker and took it down more than what we even suggested. And so you really have much better sight lines to the north as a result of that, which I think is very helpful. The other piece that happened right around the same time is, I don't know if you've been through the California-Wyoming intersection, but that mini roundabout has been enhanced with some delineators and from some road markings encouraging people to yield. And so we think that people are going in general slower through that intersection as well. We'll do counts on that in a month or two after it's been in place for a while. You don't want to count too soon after a new treatment because there's a newness factor that is going to artificially kind of slow things while people stop and look at the stuff. So we want them to get used to it, but not so used to it that they're flying through it again.
All right. Anybody else have anything before I let Ben have his time with us with his comments? All right, let's see none. Go ahead, Ben.
Okay, I guess for me the bulk of what I want to discuss today is the CIP project list. CIP historically has stood for Capital Improvement Program. I think we're in the and it refers to, well, capital improvements, major investments in city infrastructure or equipment and things like that that represent major purchases. I think we're in the process of rebranding CIP, keeping the acronym, but changing it to stand for Community Investment Program to reflect better the values that that we want to see. These are not just a series of assets that the city owns, but really it's how we're spending public money to invest in the community long term. And so that's what we want to see there. Related to that, or along with that, my office has undertaken kind of creating a master project list from which staff then can, public works and engineering staff and planning staff can work together to put together the actual community investment program funding request that goes to council and the administration. And so historically it's been well, here, I'm going to share my screen and do a really brief overview of the presentation that I give. Let's see here. So, all right, is everybody seeing this? So, the goal of redoing we're making a new process for the capital, the community investment program, is to strengthen the relationship between the long range transportation plan and other planning docs, create a data-driven process and better align funding, and then create a results-based process to increase transparency, efficiency, and productivity, while also maintaining flexibility to be opportunistic and reactive to private development or projects that might originate within other agencies and things like, or grants, that sort of thing. This is part of a strategic framework that the city is embracing to do integrated planning and intentional investment. This is one of the ways that we're a good visualization for how we are looking at this list. We are collecting, we collected a lot of projects, we screened them and found out as much information as possible that we could about the projects, where they are, what is entailed, how does it address safety, how does it address connectivity, all of those things. Then we scored the projects. We're currently we're about where the Pac-Man is. We're developing and ranking the scenarios for funding and prioritizing the recommended projects to then put forward to council. And that the initial council meeting where they're going to see the recommended actual projects that we're bringing forward in the next 5 years will be August 12th. And so this is really a timely meeting for the Bike Ped Board to weigh in. Staff has not finished putting together what we are putting forward. And so feedback today will help us significantly in our conversations tomorrow and between now and Wednesday to make a list, a prioritized list that we think that council should fund. So these projects come from a lot of our facility plans, which have really helped kind of provide some of that detail on the types of projects. And the new project list, it combines all of the transportation projects, or at least most of the transportation project types into one list. Previously, we had a sidewalk program and a road program and spot improvement programs, and it was not, some things remained funded, some didn't. There was no good way to compare projects against each other and outcomes. And so this puts them all in one list. It identifies project types, it maintains where they come from, but then refines the project scopes and identifies the intended outcomes. We provide enough description to evaluate the benefits and costs without having to do a full-blown kind of scope of the project, because one of the challenges we face is I might think of a project, hey, this would be a great sidewalk that needs adding, but without getting all the staff members on board with, well, these are the components. It's not just putting a sidewalk on this, but it's also making sure that we have a crosswalk at this location and that it's boulevard for these reasons. Then we might not all be on the same page. So we're providing enough description to evaluate those. We're gathering comprehensive background info to score the project, such as what is the pavement condition? Is this project within an urban renewal district? Are there potential water projects or sewer projects that might impact us doing work there? And then we score the projects based on goals and objectives that I'm going to go over briefly in a minute, with extra weight on safety and equity, which was per council feedback. So those criteria are plan conformity, connectivity, access, safety, equity, and then readiness and leverage. And since I went more in depth in our last meeting about each of these, I'm just going to quickly go through them. But plan conformity, does the project meet our goals? And we look at several plans to evaluate that. Connectivity in this context means connections to other facilities like sidewalks, mountain lines, specifically the higher frequency and longer running routes, direct connection to primary commuter trails and other bike facilities. And then conversely, projects scored well if they were not connected at all, meaning that it was the only way in and out of a neighborhood or a location, which kind of provides some extra importance for making sure that it meets the needs of all users. Access in this context means destinations within walking distance. And so a higher scoring project has hospitals, elementary schools, regional parks, downtown, grocery, high concentrations of retail, large employment, and then lower scoring projects are kind of more monolithic, lower density neighborhoods. Safety, we look at traffic speeds, volumes, number of travel lanes, crash history, especially non-motorized, whether or not it's on a safe route to school, whether or not the project is on a truck route, because a higher percentage of heavy truck traffic also means that it's a higher need for for more vulnerable users. And then finally, how well does the project itself address safety? For example, what those maps show is the bicycle and pedestrian crashes along South Avenue between Reserve Street and Fort Missoula. And you can see there's a cluster at the intersection with the Reserve. And so you could say this project should score high for safety. Well, do we have enough information to know that the project will actually address safety at that location? And so where possible, we use that information to help score projects as well. Equity, we looked at historically underserved neighborhoods as well as neighborhoods that are feeling the impacts of redevelopment. And so focusing inward and infill and smart growth is definitely a good thing and a priority of the city. But what we're noticing is that without concurrent upgrades into basic infrastructure like sidewalks, that those neighborhoods are feeling disproportional impacts of that infill. Specifically, we're looking at the Invest Health neighborhoods, meaning North Side, West Side, Franklin the Fort, and River Road. We're looking at impacts and benefits to affordable housing, capital A, capital H, meaning from our policy, not just what someone might think is or isn't affordable. And then specific impacts to vulnerable populations, including older, younger, people living with disabilities, etc. Leverage looked at other projects in the area, whether they were recently done or about to be done, and then other funding sources, whether it's urban renewal districts or redevelopment potential, such as through the Opportunity Zone in the West Side or federal grants, things like that. And then readiness is where in the phase of development is this project? Is it just in the good idea phase, or is it, do we have construction documents in hand and we're ready to build it, or is it somewhere in between? And how do we, is there an easy way to get there? And this one has some subjectivity built into the scoring because the different scope and scale of the projects, an improved crosswalk might, even if not much has been done, it might be more ready than a project that has had some of the design work done, because it won't take that much to actually improve that crosswalk. Whereas the major project, even if it has some design work, it'll need a lot more permissions and steps and hoops to jump through to get to construction. So the project list ended up with about 78 worthy projects on it, representing at least $125 million worth of investment. There's multiple project types across a broad geographic distribution of the city, and they serve all modes of travel. The top 10 list, and you should have all received versions of the project list that were viewable and sortable. So you can sort by, this is sorted by total score, but that you could score by individual scoring category. If you wanted to see what the highest scoring safety projects were, for example, you could sort your own spreadsheets like that. But the top scoring one is one that we call the West Side area. I'll get into that in a little bit. Higgins scores very high, California Street, the Kent Central Neighborhood Greenway, the Burton Street Greenway, the Broadway Cooper intersection, kind of by the McDonald's and the car wash just west of Russell, Eaton Street sidewalks, South Avenue, like we showed there between Reserve and the Fort, the Build Grant project out on Mullen Road, and then Turner, Warden, North Fifth sidewalks, scored in the top 10. Now, again, I mentioned flexibility earlier. The goal of this list isn't just to go down from project 1 through project 78 and do them in order, but we need to be flexible in order to, again, respond to private development or grant availability, or a water project that needs to happen, or and in other ways, just make sure that we are getting the bang for our buck. And then also the readiness score plays a big role in how do we get things to where they need to be. So the West Side area projects combines multiple small projects, and we feel like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There's some sidewalk, mostly repair and replacement, but some new on Pine, Nora, May, and Alder. Bike lanes on Spruce Street, safety enhancements, including rapid flashing beacons at Owen and Broadway, and Alder and Orange, and then other safety enhancements like squaring up the intersections at the Tool Railroad Alder May intersection, right at the kind of point of Little McCormick Park, if you're familiar, near DraftWorks in the Warehouse Mall. There's kind of just a big sea of asphalt where a bunch of intersections come in at weird angles. This project would add angled parking on Alder at least, if not some of the other streets, to help relieve some of the parking pressures, both for the hospital downtown and potentially the new Drift development as well at the Rivergate Triangle. And it would also include parking lot reconfiguration and bridge access improvements at the North Side Pedestrian Bridge. So it's fully multimodal. It looks, Mountain Line is coming in this year and doing, upgrading their bus stops along Spruce there. And it creates major safety improvements in several access points to the neighborhood and to downtown. And it responds to development pressure, again, from the hospital and from Drift, as well as some of the infill that's happening there. Here's a map that shows kind of all of the components, or at least most of them. Blue is sidewalk work. The light green is bike lanes on Spruce. The dark green, the Owen Street, is a greenway connecting the North Side Pedestrian Bridge down to the Drift development and the Riverfront Trail. Eventually there is planned to be another bridge over the river right there that will drop you into McCormick Park. So that's really a great north-south alternative to Orange Street. And then the red stars are the safety area improvements. The yellow stripe on Alder indicates angled parking. And then the yellow star here indicates some parking adjustments there as well. The Higgins project, this is between Broadway and Brooks, so including the hip strip section, not including the bridge, because that will be taken care of by MDT with their upcoming bridge project. But it's a high priority in many plans, including the recently adopted downtown master plan. There was a recent crash there that I believe everyone's aware of that highlights the need. You know, we knew it already, but this has really kind of catalyzed a lot of community voices around the need to do something on Higgins. There's a really great opportunity to align changes to Higgins with the bridge rehab project that's set to begin in October. We have an availability to leverage MPO money. So there's planning, regional planning money that can be put towards a project there. And so this is, in our minds, it makes some sense for the city to help contribute as well. And, but to make this work, it will require a coalition of council, staff, neighborhoods, businesses, and MDT. Another project worth highlighting is the Kent Central Neighborhood Greenway that connects all the way from the X's, the University Housing at the X's, across town, crossing Higgins, Bancroft, Brooks, Russell. There's this new connection has already been made across MRL Park, across the railroad tracks there at the Bitterroot, and then all the way out to CS Porter. So this would really create a low stress east-west connection across the entire city that doesn't exist today. And so this particular graphic is from an unsuccessful grant application from a couple years ago to just show all of the connections that this route would make. Here's an example of some of these spot improvements, A, B, C, and D. I've included some of them in this graphic. A here is at Higgins, so it include bulb outs and marked crosswalks. B, this is at Bancroft's. This is Lions Park, I think it is. And so Washington Middle is a block to the south from here. Again, bulb outs, marked crosswalks. C, this is the intersection with Brooks. And so the vision here is to create a shared use path on the south side of Kent, put in a rapid flashing beacon or some sort of user activated signal to then cross Brooks at a 90 so that you're minimizing your exposure to motor vehicles. And then a shared use path on the north side of Kent on the other side that then drops you back onto the street when you're further away from the turning movements and things like that. And so that's just an example of some of what's included in the Kent Central project. So our next steps are, we've identified our funding sources and projections over the next 5 years. We're looking at the overlapping utility and maintenance projects and anything else that we know of that might be going on. And we're creating the 5-year CIP list again to present to council on August 12th. The goal of this list is to continue refining project scopes and designs, and each year updating it and refining, changing our scores based on new information available, and using this as a tool to help really create an easy to follow 5-year plan. So this one, we're kind of, we're kind of last minute, quite frankly, on this, but it's just the way that the timing has worked out. And we anticipate with this new tool in hand that we'll be coming to the board much earlier in the year and trying to collectively create a scope of work for the upcoming years that has time to have an iterative process where we get feedback from the board, we make suggestions as staff, we come back and work with council, staff, and citizens to deliver projects that have a lot of value. So with that said, what I'm hoping for from the board today is that I hope that people had a chance to look at the list and familiarize yourself with a little bit, see where projects that you know about or want to see scored. Feel free to ask me any questions about scoring or scopes of projects. But then what I'm hoping for is to get some suggestions from the board for, are there things on here that maybe didn't score as well, but you feel like should be high priorities, or things that scored well that maybe you think can be kicked down the road a couple of years? Or is there, are there suggestions from board members for what the city should prioritize? And I did put very big round number project cost estimates on this list. And just for frame of reference, it's conservatively, we have about $3 million a year to spend on projects, but it's not as clean as saying, okay, we have $3 million to spend and this project is estimated to cost $3 million. Let's do it next year. It means that the design phase will probably take a year for a big project. A project costs $3 million, probably the design phase takes a year for planning, public engagement, hiring a consultant, doing the public engagement, doing the planning and the scoping, refining those designs, and getting ready to construct. And that's typically 15 to 25% of a total project cost is the design phase. And then the construction might happen the following year. It might wait a year or two, depending on when the bid documents are prepared. Is it a good climate for bidding, or should you wait 6 months until maybe the companies have slowed down a little bit? And so it's, I'm not asking the board to do the complex math of what do we do exactly when and what phases of what when. More, it's kind of the bigger picture, broader discussion of what projects are important and how should we, are there suggestions for ways to use the list as it's been developed to help guide implementation of these projects?
All right, I got a couple of folks that got questions, comments. Jean, go ahead, you were first. We can't hear you, Jean.
You're muted, Jean. Jean, you're still muted.
Okay.
Oh,
It
there you are.
wouldn't let me do it up. It wouldn't let me do it up on top. A little bubble showed up on the screen that I didn't see. Sorry. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, on the scoring, there's 7 things that are scored from 0 to 10, but then at the end we have a bunch of things that are scored over 70. So I'm wondering where the extra points came from.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, safety and equity were council thought that those should be weighted higher, and so those were
Okay.
weighted double.
Okay, great. Since I'm on the mic here, the one thing you had shown was, I think, was the north. There was the one that was the first one you had on the list, up by Owen Street and the
Yep.
Alder and all that. Talking about the angle parking. I read this a couple different places, and it's kind of matches my own personal experiences. If we're going to have angled parking, I think it's safer certainly for cyclists that may have either a bike lane or just using the street along there, to have back-in angle parking for two reasons. You're not going to have people zipping into a front drive angle parking because all of a sudden they see a spot and cutting off a cyclist, almost like a right hook. That's number one. Number two, when the people are leaving their parking spot, well, first of all, when they enter, they have to stop, and then their backup lights show up. So that warns cyclists that, yeah, this guy's backing into the space, and it warns other traffic as well. When they come out of their parking space, obviously they have a much better view of the street, so they can see better, smaller vehicles like bicyclists. So just in general, I think whenever we're considering parking, angled parking rather, unless there's some other conflicting aspect, I think the back end is a preferable way to go. And there's a couple places that use it, a number of places that don't. Some could be converted maybe, like by Sentinel High School. The other ones on Wyoming, not so much, because you've got sidewalk use that people backing in would kind of put their exhaust up against some of these little storefronts and stuff like that. So I understand that. But in general, I think if we can go with back-in angle parking, if it's being considered, that's the safest bet for cyclists.
Thanks, Gene. That's helpful. And that's something that we have considered. Interestingly, the Alder Street project was just going to be a striping project at first, because it would be a way to quickly respond to parking pressure. And if it was going to just be striped, we looked at back-in angle and decided against it because the curb heights, in some places it's non-existent, in other places it's like 10 or 12 inches high, which would do real damage to a muffler. But we've also identified that street really to be most effective and safest for everybody would include redoing the curb work and the corners to meet ADA. And if we did that, then we would pursue back-end angle parking.
Okay.
Now, I did have something I wanted to ask about I'm glad you brought up the angled parking. I recall, I don't know if everybody on this board at the time was part of that discussion, but I do recall a discussion about whether or not we would in the future recommend back-end parking. And my recollection is that it was generally frowned on by the board to do it. I don't know if that was because of, to a specific project, or if it was just something that we were just like saying, hey, we're not thrilled about this idea of back-end parking. I don't know I don't know who was all on the board at that time or what you remember, Ben.
My recollection was that it was related to a specific project, I think, where there were concerns about storefronts or something. I think it was downtown somewhere that was being restriped. I think that historically this board has advocated back-end angle parking. And so I can look back through minutes and see if I can find reference to that. But perhaps when contemplating goals for 2021, perhaps making a policy statement about angled parking would be something that this board would want to take up.
As I remember it, Ben, it was by the sawmill area where you've got the storefronts, and they had already put in the front end angle. And again, the cars extending over the curbs where places had outside seating by cafes made it problematic to switch it around. That's the only thing I remember, and I had commented on that.
Okay, yeah, and I will do some snooping back myself too. Before I let Jessie have her turn, do you have anything else you want to add, or should we just go right into the CIP list, Ben?
I think we should just go into the list, and I'll move, like I said, I'll move the list into the share screen so that I can be following along and we can all follow along with this if you want to discuss certain projects. Oh, I guess, no, I do want to add some things. So there are some projects that that are queued up, not necessarily to all be constructed next year, but there are things that we're working on that might not be super high scorers right now, that are moving forward for a variety of reasons. And so one of those that is a high score is the build grant. Now, as you're aware, the city and county jointly received $13 million from the federal government to construct the backbone of the roadway network out near the 44 Ranch area. And so building George Elmer to complete street standards, doing work on England Boulevard and Mary Jane Boulevard, connecting Mary Jane Boulevard all the way from Mullen to Broadway, and doing some trail work out there as well. And there's planning going along with, this build grant is happening, and then so is Mullen area master planning, which I should probably get them to come and do a presentation to this board. But they basically, as it stands now, there's a very progressive or very forward-thinking, what they're calling a street atlas for what gets built out in those neighborhoods. And so looking at really how can we, if we're starting from scratch, how can we build a road network that will encourage meeting our mode split goals? And so the main streets are scheduled to have protected bike lanes. The side streets are as narrow as possible, and some of them have trails adjacent to them. There's a really neat taxonomy that I'll try and either get them to present on next month or share with the board ahead of time, or both. But the result is that the build grant is going to construct roadways that we would not otherwise get built if we were just leaving it up to development. And so that one's moving forward. There's a local match component of that 13 million. We're also pursuing another federal grant, another build grant, kind of phase 2 of that, to help do the rest of the road work out there. I believe they're asking for another 10, maybe even 12 million on top of that. And so that is moving forward. They're in the design phase. I don't know that we're going to see ground broken in 2021, but they're definitely moving ahead quickly with that. One that is also moving ahead is the Minkler Loop project. That is one that's been in the works for a long time. That is it's the entrance to Waterworks Hill at the top of Greeno, Drive. And that is a combination of parks money, gas tax, and I think some private funding or some private easement donation anyway, to help make that happen. And then there are some others related to some of the development out in the build grant area that there is some city money involved, meaning transportation impact fees. So it's money that those developments have paid to the city to mitigate the impacts of the development. And so that includes some intersection work at Mullen and George Elmer, and Mullen and Rounda and Chuckwagon. And so those projects are moving forward sooner than later, even though they're not super high scorers on the list. South Avenue is still in design phase, and that is moving, we're going to complete the design phase of that. It's a top 10 score, and so it's possible that it will emerge as that we'll put funding towards that for construction in the next couple of years. We don't know for certain yet on that. And then Lower Miller Creek is having design phase completed as well. And that one, there needs to be a lot more, and that's to connect Linda Vista Boulevard out to where the new elementary school is out there. So there needs to be a lot more discussion about how that happens, whether it's in conjunction with private development, whether it's a special improvement district that kind of an assessment to all of the properties to the south and west that need to drive through that street every day to get into town, or if it's public money or some combo of all three, and what that would look like. But in the meantime, we're just completing the design documents. We're going to work towards completion of design documents. I think they're still just in the surveying process. And then Cemetery Road and Rogers up on the north side is another one that some of the survey and preliminary design work is being done. That one is a lot tougher to make a complete street happen because you're bounded by the railroad tracks on one side and the cemetery and heavy industrial uses on the other. And so there's very narrow right of way. And so it's going to present some challenges, but there's also needed road maintenance to happen up there. And so we're looking at, and water and sewer work as well. And so what can we do if we know that we're going to be ripping the road up? What can we do to make it as good as possible for as many people as possible? And I believe that's all that has any funding committed to it in the next 5 years of these. And so again, staff has not determined exactly where we want to recommend funding, but I can tell you some highlights. One is that I mentioned it already, but Higgins is, this cost estimate of $150,000 is not the actual construction project. We think that's the cost of the required study to actually make improvements to Higgins between Broadway and Brooks. This would look at turning movements and throughput at the signalized intersections. It would look at safety. It would potentially look at business impacts. It would look at parking impacts. It would look at different potential configurations and recommend a preferred alternative. It might even get us some of the design work done preliminarily. And so it would put us in position to, we're assuming that this study would happen while bridge construction happens so that we would be ready when the bridge was done to pursue a project to the north and south of the bridge. Another one that is emerging as an interesting project is just outside of the top 10, the Ivy Franklin Park. I believe it's number 15 on the list, the Ivy Franklin Park Greenway. This one is really interesting because Franklin Street just had the improvements with the traffic calming circles, and Ivy has had some work done at the intersection with 3rd Street between 3rd and 4th. It's had the sidewalks built by MRA just this year. And there's some redevelopment happening along Ivy, which will lead to getting some of the rest of the sidewalks built. And so with a little bit of strategic investment in sidewalks on Ivy and Franklin, and the intersection at Park, Plymouth, and Mount, you could all of a sudden have a really great connection all the way from essentially Patty Creek Drive up to California Street Bridge. And especially if this one went hand in hand with reconstruction of California Street, you'd have a new north-south route across town that, again, it exists today if you're in the know, but and everyone that I show it to is kind of stunned that it exists, and it really would benefit from making it complete. Other than those, we're not yet sure of exactly what needs to happen. Presumably there will be some preliminary work recommended to get Turner, Warden, and North 5th closer to being ready to build, because Turner Street is a truck route and it needs road maintenance really badly. And so we want to try and get sidewalks when possible. And then there's also Eaton Street is another one that the roadway is in kind of rough shape. We know it's a transit route and it's in a neighborhood that needs some help. And so that's another one that we might prioritize for sidewalk completion. And then similarly, the Kent Central Greenway is one that we want to see move forward sooner than later, but we haven't started assigning any dollar figures to certain years.
Okay. Apologize. Thanks for your patience, Jesse. Go ahead.
No, that's cool. It was a good overview. I think you did a great job with the spreadsheet. I felt like it was a snapshot view. I could look at it, find it on my map, read a little bit about the story and the connections. And I really like the price tag that you assigned for a lay person. I think it's good to have like a ballpark of how much things cost. Let's see. I also adore the Higgins Street project. I feel that with the bridge construction and the disruption that will be causing, it feels like the right moment to just get it all done at once. So when the bridge is finished, the road will then be enhanced and improved to match, and it feels right. It feels really timely. So I completely agree with the Higgins project being number one on the list for sure, because the bridge construction is going to start happening. Okay. Let's see. I am completely in agreement that the north side, west side, Franklin to the Fort neighborhoods need significant infrastructure investment. So there's equity so that all the families that live there, their kids have the same infrastructure expectations of being able to have sidewalks and streets for bicycling to school and all of those things. And I like the fact, because there were so many projects on the, you call it west side, but whatever, northwest side. I like that they were lumped together. I feel that Franklin to the Fort neighborhood generally has almost an equal number, if not a larger number of projects that could also be lumped together. If that might be helpful, maybe it wouldn't be helpful, but that was a thought that I had. I would be interested to know, because the west side project list was lumped together, what cost would then be assigned to it, because it combines so many things, because I think it's always interesting to see how the costs play out. Okay. So I like many of the same projects that have already been highlighted. One of the things that I really value is the fact that, according to your spreadsheet, the numbers I've been given, you could do 13 greenway and sidewalk projects for $235,000 and help 4 or 5 separate neighborhoods. So these would all be really low cost. So they're not big and magnificent projects as far as, just, like redesigning a whole corridor or something like that. But I mean, on my list, I have Grant Street, Franklin to the Fort Greenway, Schilling, Franklin to the Fort Greenway, Sherwood, Northside Greenway, 3rd Street reconfiguration, Gerald Greenway, which is my neighborhood, which I think would be amazing if we could connect it safely across South Avenue. Franklin School area sidewalks, amazing. Benton neighborhood greenways, amazing. The Post Siding Road by Fort Missoula. I used to bike to work on that street, and there's no room for cyclists. It's sometimes scary. I don't know if you guys know it. It's on the backside of Fort Missoula, between the golf course and Fort Missoula. The Slant Street sidewalks, 2 projects there would be included. Van Buren East Front Street Crossing would be included. Marie Street University District, Fairview, Paxton School sidewalks, again, my home neighborhood, and then Missoula Avenue, the only rattlesnake project I saw. All of those together, 13 projects, $235,000, and you're going to help community members in all those neighborhoods see like real change in their greenways for really fairly low cost in the realm of roadway construction. And so all 13 of those projects would be the same as doing, some of these other, bigger scope projects that maybe aren't as timely or something like that. And so I feel like, wow, it would be amazing. And there's a lot of big projects going on, right? The Higgins Bridge is a huge project. I support Higgins Avenue being cohesively finished at the same time. We have Russell which I remember one of my first meetings, you said that was going to continue on. It's just going to keep going and going. So we have those two really big projects going on. And I feel like people would love if their neighborhood was touched, even with a light hand, by the measures of money. But it would have a really personal impact with those communities. And so I feel like, for me, I agree with many of these projects. And I think some of the connectors, I mean, like you said, I'd never even thought of before, but they're pretty high dollar total amounts. And I would like to have it be very, very carefully selected. When you can accomplish 13 projects in 4 or 5 neighborhoods for a dollar amount that equals one project in one neighborhood, I feel like that needs to be really considered. Not that it shouldn't be done, not that it's not amazing. And I love thinking about having these different connections and things like that, but just really, really weighing that. The other thing that I'm all about having kids be safe. And I noticed a couple things safety related. One is the 3rd Street crossing at Hawthorne Elementary, and 3rd Street is, it's tricky from Reserve going west. I think it feels tight. And I read in your spreadsheet that 3rd Street crossing at Hawthorne is a worry for families. And I wondered, it's very high dollar, because basically it would be ideal to rebuild 3rd Avenue or 3rd Street, entirely, but couldn't we do something just temporary, like we did at the hospital, like some sort of mobile flashers, or, doing a little paint enhancement? Like, I just want to the people for that 3rd Street crossing at Hawthorne, the families who have told their council members, this is a problem. These are a vulnerable population. I feel like the Bike Pedestrian Board needs to say, yeah, we would support, some temporary, yeah, it'd be great if someday we could make it really like the perfectly safe place when we redo the whole street. But maybe there's a temporary thing that we can do to make it just better. And then the other thing that I want to talk about was that Kent Central project, and see, because I haven't followed. I mean, it's an amazing, as far as connection, it's an amazing big scope project. But one of the things that you noted in there was that there is this significant 5-year crash history at Central and Brooks. Is that part of the Kent Central?
No, it's actually a block to the south. The Kent Central Greenway would cross at Kent, would cross Brooks at Kent. It would switch to Central on the other side of Russell Street, behind Trempers. So the Brooks connection, or the Brooks Central crash history, is really interesting. It's a significant vehicle crash, like something like 20 crashes a year, but only in the last 5 years. Or maybe it's 25 crashes in 5 years, but it's still it's a lot. But there weren't any crashes before that, and so we're working with MDT to look at what might be happening there and why, and what can we do to change that.
Okay, and then just my final comment would be, besides all of that, which, I mean, it was kind of a little bit all over the place, but I just want to be sure that we, as a board, issue an advisory, what is it called? Advisory opinion issued at the end of this meeting for the CIP recommendations, because I do think that that's how our voice gets transmitted to the city council formally. And so whatever needs to happen, as we discussed in the last meeting, we need those deliverables. We need that very formalized communication to the city council to happen. And so I just want all the board members, if I'm understanding this correctly, to be thinking about what they want in the advisory opinion that we could issue to the city council.
Jesse, Corey, before you move on to other people, can I try and I've been taking notes on all of the comments, and I want to restate some of what Jesse said to make sure I have it correct, and then hopefully frame it in a way that helps board members decide on things and make a decision by the end of the meeting.
Well, Jessica, how do you feel about that? You've been waiting a bit. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, back to Gene. I heard Angle Street or Alder Street parking back in Angle parking. I hear that recommendation loud and clear. Higgins Street, I hear loud support for that. I heard a suggestion to consider grouping projects within Franklin the Fort neighborhood, similar to how we did the West Side. And I think that's an interesting concept and one that I know at least some of their staff members will support. And so it's one that we can definitely look closer at. You referenced 13 projects for $235,000. While a lot of those are low cost, it's a little misleading because some of them, like the Slant Street sidewalk projects, I just didn't put a dollar figure in there because I didn't have access. That number is known and I just don't know it. And so I've been waiting on engineering to get me that number and it isn't in there. So I just want to urge a little caution that some of those projects are more expensive. But that being said, something that you said, I quoted that if neighborhoods were touched even with a light hand, that it would go a long way. And I really like that as a way to frame how we might be able to put that together. And so that's something that I'm hearing support for, is doing a wide variety of low cost projects to implement quicker in multiple neighborhoods. I'm hearing that loud and clear. Third and Hyberta, I just want to call attention. It's identified in two different places on the map. There's a full reconstruction of 3rd Street west of Reserve to include sidewalks and bike lanes. And then there's just the intersection with 3rd and Hyberta. And the 3rd and Hyberta intersection seems a little expensive, $100,000. And the reason for that is that the ADA requires that if you enhance a crosswalk that you need to have curb ramps at it. And we would need to, so that would require some design work and concrete work. And so it's, if it was just putting in a flashing beacon at the existing corner, we could probably do that for a lot less, but the required concrete work ups that cost and requisite engineering. That being said, I still hear that that is a priority and that's one that we will continue to look at. And then my takeaway from your question about Kent Central is that, or from your comments about Kent Central, is that it sounds transformative, but also a little bit costly and maybe difficult to bite off. And so that's something that I can definitely work with as well. I guess my question to the board when looking at a place like 3rd and Hyberta is, how does that compare with, say, Russell and the Fairgrounds, or Russell and Ernest? Those are two similar crossings near schools or that serve schools that have very similar treatments on a roadway of a similar speed and similar character. And so I'd ask that people think about that a little bit. And should we prioritize those in any different way? Russell at the YMCA has had between the YMCA and the Fairgrounds has had a significant pedestrian crash. 3rd and Hyberta, knock on wood, has not. But anyways, whoa, cat. And yeah, so anyways, with that, Jesse, does that sound like what you said? Am I recording that accurately? Okay, this is all helpful information. So this is the sort of discussion that even if it becomes challenging to write an actual recommendation, I think that we can definitely work with this to that I can bring this back to my colleagues and say, hey, these are the projects that we had a lot of support for and that the Bike Ped Board recommends moving forward. And then maybe as we work on this in the next few days, and then maybe a board member can take this information and read a letter at council next Wednesday. Or send council an email. I know that Wednesday midday, it might be hard for people.
Okay. All right. Jessica?
Okay. Let's see if I can respond to so before I go into what I was thinking. So as far as the difference between like Hyberta and 3rd and Russ, most things being equal, I think that the Jesse's comments about different neighborhoods with the light hands, agree with that, and that people notice when changes are happening to see the rapid deployment. Okay, we're putting this in, it's easy to go and coming back in. And so that's one reason that Ivy from the doing some work through the road committee, the Slant Street Gateway, and maybe we'll revisit that. But there's some opportunities to do a few spots per. And so that would be a reason to kind of, there's something that's gone in, people see that going in. I conversation with somebody on that about it, partly because of the sidewalks, lack of sidewalks in that area. So, and make some changes would be great for people to see. And the other one, I can't remember where this is exactly, but 10th and within the top 10.
Okay, Jessica, can I pause you for a second? You're lagging really bad. I don't know if everybody else is having that experience, but I am.
Yeah, I'm kind of able to follow, but
Okay, let me try. Maybe I'll leave and come back and see. I was having some issues last.
Your audio's
Okay.
breaking up.
Okay, I'll try again.
Okay.
I caught the gist that 3rd and Hyberta has the added benefit of being a neighborhood that hasn't seen much improvement, and so doing something there, especially if it could be light, would be beneficial. And then, yeah, that was kind of the bulk of what I caught from Jessica. So hopefully she comes back. James or Corey, do you have any kind of broad comments like this?
Mine is, my big thing right now is something in my neighborhood, the Turner, North 5th and Warden intersections there. Now I'm not sure what exactly your what project kind of ideas are going there. I mean, is that intersection with Warden, Stoddard, North 5th, or is it up further with Turner? Because North 5th doesn't really intersect Turner at all. So that's some clarification there. Maybe I'm not understanding something there.
Okay, I'll start there. So this would be constructing and completing the sidewalks along Turner, beginning at Scott Street at the west, going along Turner, down Warden, and along North 5th to Orange Street. It would also include looking at safety at that weird intersection with Stoddard, Warden, and North 5th Street.
Okay, yeah, this is where I kind of have an issue with not using any anecdotal evidence, because I have crossed that intersection and there's people in my neighborhood that have crossed that intersection, and people coming west off of North 5th, they have that free right turn. They actually don't have a stop sign at all, but they can take that right turn and they're not paying any attention to pedestrians on that corner. So it's like, that's why I'm like wanting to know what's being looked at, if anything's yet, for that intersection.
No, we just know that intersection needs to be looked at. But one of the reasons, I'm going to go back to the slideshow and go to the top 10 list. As you can see, the Turner, Warden, North 5th is at it's at a low readiness score, and that's because we haven't done any of the surveying work to know exactly where sidewalks would go, and we haven't looked at exactly what treatment might we want to pursue at that intersection. All we know is that intersection is challenging, and so we haven't looked at what are the solutions yet. But looking at that intersection and hopefully making it safer is part of this project. We just don't
Okay.
know what that looks like yet.
Okay. And my other question, you may or may not know anything about this, but I see so few semi tractors going through our area that why is Turner designated a truck route? I mean, North Fifth and Turner are considered truck routes. I mean, is it because the distributors and the city shops are off of Scott there?
Not just the city shops, but the dump as well. And so if you're coming off the Orange Street Bridge, it's the easiest way to get to the dump, especially if you can't get under the Orange Street underpass.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so that is, and then I don't know if you noticed some of the kind of long-term fantasy projects, but one of them is a Turner Street extension. That would be a project that went through the city shops and then connected back up towards the dump that way. And so, there are plans. I advise, especially if you're a Northside resident or just have interest or work there, is to read the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan. It really lays out a vision for adding connections in that whole area.
Okay. All right, thanks. I'm gonna go ahead and let Jessica finish her comments. Looks like things have cleaned up for her.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that it?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Can you still no?
You cut in, then you come out, and then you get still, and then you move again.
Okay. Oh wait, it's okay.
You want to maybe try turning off your video and see if we can just listen to you?
Sure. Yeah, is that any better?
A lot
Actually,
better,
yeah.
actually.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Still no?
No, we can hear you.
You can. Okay, cool. Okay, so I don't know how much of that before got through. I guess the basics were just that I like the idea of Ivy Franklin Park Greenway being revisited after some of the rapid, and for those neighbors to be able to see that the city is taking feedback and then coming back in and making more improvements and understanding how those changes might affect the neighbors. So light hands repeatedly, I think, is good. And maybe as a board, we can consider that as kind of an overall thing to recommend to council that I feel like those are very productive projects, especially for relationships with neighborhoods and people feeling like the city is doing things for their neighborhood and there's a good communication between the organizations. So the other question, I had a question about cemetery. So on there it says that Howard Razor is inside master plan. And I just wondered what the thought was for that, whether it would continue to Scott Street, because that's kind of on the north side there, right?
It is, yep. Let me go to Google Maps here and show this because it'll just take me, I was just saying before you joined that people should read the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan, which is where these projects really were identified. But so Howard Razor is this one that it crosses Reserve at a signal and becomes expressway. So it goes all the way out, past all this housing and comes in. And the plan for Howard Razor is to be, protected bike lanes, boulevards, wide sidewalks in this area and really be a kind of commercial center at North Reserve that doesn't exist, kind of past the industrial uses. And then kind of become more rural in character, but still be the main bike ped connection, kind of past the outskirts of the wood products mill and come this way, and then connect. Zoom out again, and then connect into Coal Mine Road up to the dump and be kind of the main road over to Scott.
Okay.
So that would, basically it would be a way to provide a main kind of northwest to southeast connection through this neighborhood that doesn't have the constraints of the cemetery and the railroad tracks, but it does have the constraints that Roseburg owns all of the land. And so right now we show pretty lines on a map, but there's no plan to move that forward in the near future.
Okay. Yeah, because cemetery is a good connection between kind of the north side and North Reserve. And I think Howard Razor would be easy enough to replace that for bikes. And maybe thinking about pedestrians going from the north side to Reserve just wouldn't happen. So maybe that's fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that
But
up. Jessica.
as far as what might the right of way on Cemetery Road? I mean, do you think there'd be
It's
room
tough.
for a sidewalk?
We're really looking at not much here. I don't know that we have more room than kind of exists. There's maybe a few feet to pave on each side, but I'm gonna use this map. Hopefully I can get up there quick enough.
While Ben's doing that, I don't know if you recall, Ben, the last regular meeting we had, and I asked about that trail that was going along the backside of the Catholic cemetery over here. Now that she pointed that out, that makes more sense. If we're at some point wanting to connect Howard Razor that way, that makes that sense. That was just a comment I wanted to make.
Mm.
Oh, so this isn't even right of way. It's, yeah, see, so you can see here, the road here is entirely within the railroad right of way. So it's probably just easement. It really is a difficult stretch in here. I'll know a lot more about this in a couple weeks because they're doing some of the service or some of the surveying to see what room do we actually have to work with.
Sure. Yeah, that would be good to just kind of follow up on. I do think there'd be, I mean, it's a good way to get to North Reserve kind of, but it definitely doesn't feel safe for.
Yeah.
Bike.
I mean, if you look in this section right here, kind of by the refinery, look at how narrow this is. It's not centered on the road. The underlayer isn't always lined up, but if we just do a quick measurement of this, it's only 30 feet. And so that's, yeah, really narrow when you think the roadway, especially because this is a heavy truck industrial route, the minimum 22 feet just for the travel lanes. We really are not leaving a ton of room to do other stuff. So I think that within the next few months, we will see a presentation at the board with some different ideas for what to consider on Cemetery Road as they think about moving that project forward.
Cool. Sounds good.
And just for reference, that map I was using is the Missoula County Property Information System that's available to anyone on the public. You just Google that, Missoula County Property Information. You can look up parcel size and ownership and right-of-way widths and things like that.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, on the Howard Razor thing, Ben, can you get somebody in? I mean, do you have a time frame of when somebody could come talk to us about that? That's seems like a really worthy project to me.
How do you mean Howard Razor versus Cemetery, or do you just mean like Cemetery Road up here?
Howard Razor versus Cemetery. I mean,
okay. Yeah, I will definitely bring that back. I'll do what I can. I'll talk to the powers that be and figure out what we can present.
all right, thank you. Gene, you had questions?
Yeah, just a couple things on the, and this has been maybe a refresher from you, because I just had just a general thought and then a couple of specifics on the greenways. The intent of the greenways, and this is sort of my assumption, you can kind of modify it, is to give local people, the 8 to 80 group, non-collector type streets to move through neighborhoods from one neighborhood to another and stay off the higher volume, higher speed streets, which is great. And I'm assuming that these are going to, in some ways, be attracting people who use some of those other streets now, but don't really like it. And also new people who may not have been using it before. And again, that's great. What I'm wondering is, how is it going to affect the volume, let's say, or the usage of people who might already, or in the past, have been using other streets? And I'll give an example. So we've got Higgins, South Higgins, which has bike lanes. It's heavily traveled. In some areas, the bike lanes have some parking, not too often, but it's occasional. So when we look at Gerald, I'm sorry. Gerald Avenue is the greenway. So is that expected to bring in users from Higgins or bring in new users? And how are we going to address some of the crossing issues on the streets like 5th and 6th on Grant, in terms of people who want to move north and south and yet not have to make a lot of pauses for cross streets? So that's, if you can give me a little bit of input on that, Ben.
Yeah, so you're exactly right about the intent of greenways. They're to attract the 8 to 80 crowd that might be less comfortable on a bike and not either used to or not comfortable riding on our busier streets. If you go out, you should know this as a University District resident, Gerald Avenue is pretty heavily trafficked already by people biking and walking. Every time I'm on it, I see a lot of people already using it. And so I think that that's happening. The crossings of major streets, when you see a greenway project with a high price tag on it, that's because the intersection with a major street needs a lot of work to actually get people across safer. There's the mayor asked me this question when we first brought greenways up back in 2016 or 2015, maybe even earlier, when we first started talking about them. He asked me in a public meeting, he said, so how does this square with our efforts to build bike lanes on major roads? Is this an either or situation? And I said, absolutely not. This is a both and situation. This is where people who want to go fast and get where they're going, we want to provide the appropriate facility for them to be able to do that. And for people who want to get where they're going in a more comfortable manner, but maybe have to stop at cross streets, a little more frequently, that's what the greenways are about. That being said, we're trying to make those crossings as easy as possible. For example, on Gerald, through a federal grant, we have push button flashers at 5th and 6th Street to make that crossing easier. If you're biking, you do have to get up on the sidewalk at the intersections to use those. I think that there's maybe potential to look at ways to convert those to either pick you up as a sensor as a bicyclist, or to maybe channelize where bikes go and put a push button for them as well. But part of looking at the greenway network is looking at where do stop signs exist, and are they actually, if a greenway is being stopped, is it necessary for safety purposes? Can we switch it to stopping the other street instead? Or can we convert a stop sign to a calming circle? Or are there ways that we can facilitate quicker movement by bicyclists while not just encouraging speeding or cut through traffic by drivers?
Okay, thanks. That addresses my stuff. Yeah, I'm again, when I head downtown, if I'm not using the bike path, I just head over to the traffic circle on Bancroft and Higgins, and I just shoot right up Higgins. And again, I use the Sharrows through the hip strip and never have a problem. So it makes, I'm one of these people, I just soon have a quick shot and deal with the stop and go. So anyhow, so that's good information that it's not one or the other, whether you want to shunt necessarily people off of the more thoroughfare type places. It's, option A or option B, which is great. That being said, and I'm looking at the greenways shown on my nice little Missoula bike map here I've got. Help me find places as we're talking. So I'm looking at the ones on either side of Johnson. We've got one on Schilling and one on Grant. And again, if we're going to prioritize, I'm wondering if, and again, they're not necessarily costly, but in some ways they seem a little bit redundant, and Grant not going quite as far through as Schilling. Of those two, I would prioritize Schilling. So that's my input there. And then on 4th Street, we have the nice wide bike lanes on the conversions on 5th and 6th. So I'm wondering if that maybe reduces some of the need, at least on the parts of 4th up to Russell, for that. So that's just kind of a question there in terms of, we've kind of helped out the east-west flow by going to one lane on 5th and 6th at this point and putting the bike lanes in there. And I do see the Kent Central corridor as being really helpful as again, an east-west connector that really isn't available on that part of town. So I kind of give high marks to that. So as we're kind of trying to tie this all up in a little bow, like Jessica says, let's have it deliverable. I just want to interject those couple things.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Grant Street, one of the great things about Grant Street is that it's done. The sidewalks are completed. It's a complete north-south connection from 3rd to 4th, or from 3rd to North Avenue. The sidewalks have all been completed, some by MRA, some by the school, some through development, and so that part's done. And it will never be a through street for vehicles because there are 2 irrigation ditch crossings that have bike ped bridges over them alone. And so the only work that's needed on Grant Street is some wayfinding signage and some sharrows. Ideally, those bike ped bridges that go over the irrigation ditches would be one day made fully ADA, fully accessible, but Grant largely exists and it already has relatively high usage because of that. The neighborhood, people who live in that neighborhood know that it's there and they use it. Schilling, where we don't see the redundancy is that Schilling, so Grant is already there, it's right by the school, and so it really helps as a safe route to Franklin School, whereas Schilling gets you to Franklin Park. It gets you through Franklin Park, and actually with construction or reconstruction of Curtis Street to the north of 3rd, it could get you all the way to the Milwaukee Trail. And so you're right, that one does have a kind of longer extent north and south, but we don't really feel like they're redundant because there's currently 0 all ages and abilities, or even some ages and abilities north-south routes through that neighborhood. And one of the things that we found when we're looking closer at the data is that unlike, say, in the West Side neighborhood, Phillips Street has a lot of cars, but Sherwood and Cooper and Howell, none of those have a lot of traffic. Whereas in the Franklin of the Fort neighborhood, Johnson Street has a lot of cars, but so does Eaton, so does Kemp, so does Catlin. And so there's some desire at the planning level and at the neighborhood level to kind of mitigate the issues with those streets by making sure that there are other north-south connections that feel a lot more comfortable to bike and walk on.
Okay, James?
I still appreciate the feedback though, Gene, and it's something that we'll definitely kick around. I'm not saying no, bad idea, just it's helpful info to have someone else look at the map and say, hey, this looks like a more prominent connection. Why don't you do this one first?
Right. Well, no, that's a good referencing, Ben, because I hadn't, again, I don't use those a lot. You just mentioned the shared lane markings going in on the greenways. Yeah, I'd like to, and again, this might be part of our tie-up, is to maybe kick up a little bit of the priority when they're doing the bike lane striping. I know it takes a little bit longer because of the stenciling, is to try to upgrade the sharrows that we have. You know, we got the hip strip, we got orange, we got a number of other things. And I know it doesn't necessarily attract other people biking to actually use the entire lane, that entire right-hand lane, like on Higgins and Orange. But it really kind of gives the people who do like to use it to be able to ability to say, yeah, I'm doing the right thing. Don't try to harass me, kind of thing. So that we can up the prioritization of getting the sharrows upgraded, especially on some of the busier spots. To be me personally, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, James.
All right. This is kind of going back to broad reflections from the list, and the unfortunate events on Higgins recently kind of brought to the attention to maybe the greater public how problematic that area is. But I think that since it's that strip of road is so old and so many of the buildings have been there for over a century, and just as a community, we haven't been able to really all entitled parties come together to create real reconfiguration solutions for this site. I'm hoping it's not the tragedy, but maybe the just the moment that we're in and the feeling of a need of community sense of responsibility to take care of this problem that can help to raise the prioritization of making that street better.
Great. Yeah, like I said, I think Higgins has some momentum. I know that some people groan when they hear another study, but it really will be needed to make sure that there's a lot of competing interests there: parking, businesses, driveway accesses. It's Highway 12, you know, bicycle safety, pedestrian ability to cross the street. You know, there's a whole bunch of things at play, and so that's going to require a mediated and thorough community conversation. And so I think that the good news is that we tried to do that 4 years ago at the last long range plan, and we were it was suggested that we not do it by MDT. And I think that now there's, even though it's an unfortunate reason, I think that there's a lot more political will to push that conversation. So I really anticipate that being promoted for funding. That being said, it's still worth this board. I'm hearing loud and clear that there's a lot of support on this board for it, and so as you start crafting a letter for Wednesday, I think that's good to highlight.
Yeah, Ben, I think on that, as the board in general, I think to get kind of our input on the table early on and start to take a look at the options that they've put out for the hip strip, especially area there, and in the next couple of months, maybe if we can take a look at those options individually, maybe before the meeting, and then kind of bring our response to the preferable option that each of us have, and then kind of try to come to a consensus on the board or a couple different top options type of thing.
Yeah, I think that could be helpful. You mean the options from the downtown master plan? They had like 3 or 4 of them in there. Is that what you are referring to?
Yeah, I think mostly starting with going to a 4-3 conversion, and then it's a matter of how wide the sidewalks are and where the bike lanes are going to go behind parked cars, and do we take parking away from one side of the street or the other? And I think it would be good for us to just, maybe as individual board members sometime in the next couple weeks, is go out and hang out in the hip strip for a while and look at what traffic does and what the usage is and how we would feel about different things.
It definitely wouldn't hurt to familiarize yourselves with the plan and the different alternatives that were outlined in that. That being said, I think that when we put out the request for proposals to hire a consultant for a study, we are not going to just start from solutions. We're going to really start from, here are all of the moving pieces. Here are some of the solutions that have been put forward. Please help us get to a point where we can build some consensus around a preferred alternative. And so I'm trying, even though I have my own preferences as a professional, as a personal user of that roadway, and as someone who has friends who own businesses there, I have different ideas of what would work, why, and where. I'm trying to go into this with as open a mind as possible about what what might come out. And I think that where we have a potential to run into opposition and kind of bang our heads against each other if we are arguing for a certain solution before really understanding the full nature, the full scope of the conversation.
I want to echo something Britt has brought up a couple of times, Ben, as far as had to do with the COVID safety stuff on that bridge. Do you know, I haven't heard anything. Have you heard anything?
We have not heard any response from MDT or the health department. When we had the kind of the special meeting, I emailed the health department and my contact over there and have not heard back about it at all.
Okay. All right, I will have to help with that follow-up too. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments about any of the CIP projects? All right. Now, as far as the deliverables, I've heard a couple of people have mentioned they would like to see some at this meeting. Have you written down what exactly you're looking for and so that you can present a motion? I'll just go ahead with Jesse. Jesse?
Hey, okay, so I have just made a quick Google Doc of the things that I think I've heard from different board members that I think would make a good advisory opinion to issue. Number one would be prioritize Higgins Avenue reconfiguration while the bridge is being constructed. Number two, give small projects, of which I've seen 13 that are less than or equal 50K in 5 different neighborhoods priority so that tens of thousands of people have their daily life made better, safer, more accessible. Number 3 is prioritize when school safety, sidewalks, or crossings are a concern, whether that's a temporary measure or permanent. Consider changing the Franklin to the Fort projects to a grouping like you did with the West Side. And I think that was it. I don't know, was James done?
I was done. Yeah, it ended abruptly. I couldn't really think of the best way to say that stretch of roadway really represents a lot of what is important to us as a city. And because the system is so antiquated, we're not really stepping up as a community and have failed citizens and visitors to our community. And that's it.
Sorry, mouse was sticking.
I guess I want to put you on the spot for one more thing. So I know that there's multiple funding sources that we bring to the table and there's multiple phases of projects. It's really difficult to parse out. In fact, that's what a lot of the engineering staff, that's what they do when they manage projects, is like, where does all the money come from and are there limitations on it and all that stuff. That being said, we typically know that we have in the ballpark of 600 grand to spend on $600,000 to $700,000 to spend on the sidewalk components of a project. And so we're trying to hit that mark every year because it's that's the public money, and then there's another or that's actually a combination of public money and assessment to adjacent property owners, with the public paying probably about 70%, and then the individual property owners paying on average about 30% of a project cost, maybe even less. And so knowing that, what are there sidewalk projects on this list, either specific sidewalk projects or along greenways or part of full street reconstructions that you think we should prioritize? And the sidewalk projects are typically blue, the greenways are green, and the street reconstructions are orange. And all of those include sidewalk components for the most part.
I would just say Franklin to the Fort neighborhood, all of it. I mean, I drove all those streets when we were looking at the resurfacing projects earlier in the summer, late spring, and that neighborhood has such interrupted sidewalks. I would say I would love it all rolled into one and we could just fix a bunch of things in there, because their kids don't have consistent sidewalks. There's not bike lanes. There's no neighborhood greenway. I mean, it is the most high need neighborhood that I have driven around in Missoula.
I'm seeing head nodding. Is there other agreement with that?
I agree.
I'm not familiar with the area that much, but I mean, it certainly makes sense.
Yeah, I agree too. Sorry, I'm a little distracted trying to listen and look at.
That's all right. Like I said, I have a meeting tomorrow midday. We have a working meeting with Public Works Director and Aaron Wilson and engineering staff to really start putting scenarios together. Like, which project do we, like I said, Higgins is almost without a doubt going to move forward, but then, what do we put for design work in next year, and then construction the following year, and then design work the following year, and construction in 2023, and that sort of thing. I think that you've given me a lot to run past the group and put on the radar, and I think that it'll be. I will share with this board. I think that you can craft your letter about the recommendations, especially as Jesse read them, without this information, but I will still send the board as soon as I can the kind of proposed list, so that when you do, if you care to attend the council meeting next Wednesday, you can weigh in knowing what that list looks like and seeing how it incorporated your suggestions and comments and questions.
Okay, Jesse?
Okay, so that sounds great. I would love to attend the meeting. It's confusing, I would say, since they're all Zoom, on how you quote attend a meeting, but I'm happy to craft the letter. I just wanted some guidance about what we do with the advisory opinion. So you want me to write what I've just discussed with the board? Do we need to have like a motion that says, based on those basically 4 take homes, that we all concur? I'll write the letter that I can present it to council next Wednesday, but do I need to send it to everyone? I mean, what happens next?
So it would be, yes, you need a motion. It needs to be seconded and approved. The letter, it would be great to send it to council a day before the meeting and then plan on reading it at the council meeting. I think that while it's a little tricky to vote, to make a motion and vote on a letter that you don't have written in hand, until it backfires, I'd say you should be trusted to craft it based on the discussion until, and have that work until it doesn't. Because if you craft one and then all of a sudden Gene says, wait a minute, I didn't say that and vote differently,
Right.
Then that's an issue. But I think that it sounds, I'm seeing head nodding and hearing a lot of general agreement, and especially the way that you framed those comments are kind of, other than Higgins, they weren't super specific in their project recommendations. And I think that will, assuming that this board all agrees to that, I think that it will help inform council's decision on what projects they fund when.
Yeah, I don't see that there would be any problem with accepting something that Jesse writes up for us. As long as, you know, it stays within what you know that we agree on, and we can go ahead and if anybody wants to offer a motion to give her that, so that she can have that ready for council next week.
Another piece of that, Jesse, is I'll email you the letter, the Bike Ped Advisory Board letterhead and things like that, so you can put it in the format. Technically, Corey should sign it when it's finished being written as the
Yeah.
chair.
So
Okay,
yes,
so can I make the motion?
go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to issue an advisory opinion on the CIP projects to include 4 points. One is prioritizing the Hickens Avenue reconfiguration to align with the bridge construction. The second is to give small projects, of which I counted 13, that are less than $50,000 in 5 neighborhoods a priority. Number 3 is prioritize school safety, sidewalk and crossing concerns. Number 4 is change Franklin to the Forta grouping like West Side.
Again, I don't know if it's worthwhile, and maybe we don't have consensus, Jesse, on adding this. I mentioned a little bit before, and I wasn't sure if it got in or not, is given some of the larger, pricier things that maybe are farther down the road, again, I think that there's some really good value in terms of getting across Brooks, et cetera, for the Kent Central Corridor. So I'd like to include that as something on a, you know, farther, it's part of the top 10. I think I'd like to see it on the list, unless anybody's got objections to it.
Any other discussion on that motion?
All I would say about the Kent Central transformation is that it is transformative, and I have no problem issuing that we recognize that it could be transformative for the community, but it is an estimated cost of $500,000, which is more than all 13 of the other projects in 5 neighborhoods. And so I want everyone to see that.
Well, I'm not saying put it ahead of those, certainly.
Again, we're looking at 5 years of funding at an average of, you know, at a conservative estimate of $3 million a year. So I think that it's possible to see all of that within the 5-year horizon of the CIP.
And I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I'm comfortable including it as like recognizing its transformative effect.
Okay. So that's in.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay.
Just-
Hey, Ben, sorry,
Is that
one
the
more
vote
thing.
for
I
being
just wanted
opposed,
to,
or were you just delayed?
there was a bunch of talking there, so I'm not sure who was first and what was said.
Sorry, I'll go. I was asking if Jessica's hand was very late, and I didn't know if it was voting against the letter or if it was because your video is frozen.
I don't have any problems.
Thank you.
Other than video.
and then Ben, I was asking for help with the, you're gonna send me the letterhead. I can compose the letter. I'm totally comfortable with that, but just in the era of COVID, reading a letter at the council, just helping me with like being on the agenda and accessing that would be great.
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Council, I'll send this to Corey to distribute to the board, just send it to the board, but council has recently started working with using Zoom. Oh, whatever the Zoom like Teams is that has different kind of categories of meeting attendees. There's hosts, there's presenters, there's audience members and that sort of thing, and you have different rights as them. And so I will just make sure that that you're on there as the appropriate person to read a prepared statement.
Awesome. And just how to access that meeting, that would be great. Because I do think it's kind of confusing, you know.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on CIP? Okay. And in the interest of time, I would like to move that we table the new business to the next meeting, which is the local street limits and starting our annual priorities conversation.
Yep.
Corey, may I provide just a very brief update on the local speed limits conversation?
Sure.
The MPO and my office have partnered to hire an intern to start exploring what that would actually entail. And so they're doing research on other communities that have adopted a local lower speed limit for local streets citywide. They're looking at what challenges to that might be, what ramifications might be, and the kind of deliverable for that aspect of her internship is a white paper to present to ultimately to council, kind of recommending one direction or another. We're coming at it from the assumption that it's a good idea, but you know, it's going to be good research about why you would do this, how you would do it, what are the challenges, what are the limitations, and what's the recommendation. And so I will, she just started last week and is just doing a lot of reading right now and kind of information gathering, but I'll invite, her name's Madison, I'll invite her to come and update this board when she has a relevant information.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Anybody? Okay. Or the motion is to, I don't know if we need to table the local streets till next month, depending on what, oh gosh, what is her name? Has something she wants to practice present before she goes to council with it, and tabling the VPAB annual priorities. There's no, just go ahead and do a quick voice vote. All in favor of tabling the new business in the next meeting?
That's fine.
Aye.
Okay, there's seeing no opposition to it, we'll go ahead and move those to the next meeting. I don't have any announcements to make to the board. I'm not sure if Ben has anything.
Yeah, just that I want to thank everyone for your participation, your kind of thorough look at this list. I recognize it's kind of tedious and it might be hard to see immediate benefit. It'll be, you know, next construction season at the earliest that some of these will happen, and some of what's being forwarded is just design. But this is the first step in something. This is the first time that we have brought this to the board in a way that is meaningful since it was statutorily kind of added to the board's list, I believe in 2015 or 16. So this is a big deal, even if it feels a little bureaucratic and tedious. This was a really helpful meeting, and I think your input is gonna, over the time, is really going to help influence funding decisions and what actually happens. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody from me as well for attending the special meeting and putting your input in on that one. All right, there's nothing else. Our next meeting will be on September 1st, which is Tuesday at 3:00 p.m. here on Zoom. Staff will get out the link when it's time.
Corey?
What's that? Okay.
Oh, Corey, just before we adjourn, because it looks like that's what we're ready to do. Just a quick little, and it just popped into my head, sorry. A side note on California Street crossing of the trail. Jesse had said that, you know, there's a lot of things that have been, looks a lot better. I'm still wondering if the case of people doing UPS deliveries and other people parking in some of that space, cutting off sightlines, if there isn't a possibility as sort of a quick preliminary thing is to get some medium-sized boulders, obviously with some reflectors, whatever, so people don't hit them at night, put into some of those areas to physically keep people from parking and stealing those sightlines.
Thanks, Gene. I forgot to mention, we are looking into that, maybe some Jersey barriers or something on just
Okay.
just northeast of the intersection, essentially. There's those 90-degree parking spots that people have, and then there's a gate to access that empty lot. And then there's like one or two kind of no man's land areas that do get parked in. And so, yeah, we're looking into the possibility of just moving some barricades up there of some kind.
Yeah, maybe something a little bit more environmental.
It wouldn't be new. It would be
New
stuff that
Jersey.
we already have. It would be reuse.
Okay.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting adjourned at 5:04 p.m. Thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.